the popular Legend by Scythe is now available in black. Meet the Mugen 5 Black Edition CPU cooler. Similar as to what Noctua and certain other brands have done, Scythe too has decided to release a fully black version of one of their renowned popular coolers. And honestly, from an aesthetic point of view, this definitely is looking incredible. And in fact, I can happily let you know this one's not too harsh on one's wallet. Nonetheless, it currently goes for like $60 US, thus costs a fair bit more than the traditional classic Mugen 5, coming in at about $50. Right off the bat, let me point out that there should be no difference in cooling performance between those different editions. That is, if you don't grab a Mugen that comes with 2 fans. And such I have included in my testing today, namely the ARGB Plus version. That one, of course, tends to cost a couple dollars more than today's Black Edition. Nonetheless, it'll be interesting to find out how well such a Mugen 5 is cooling with 1 as well as 2 fans attached to it. And of course, how well such a Scythe air cooler stacks up against those absolutely gigantic monsters, Noctua NHD15 and Deepcool's Assassin 3. After all, it needs to be said that Scythe is aiming to deliver us consumers not necessarily a gigantonormous, but rather a convenient to work with cooler. Basically something a little more compact and easier to work with. So let's get started. As very much expected with Scythe, we're getting some pretty nice stuff included. Besides the heatsink, fan, mounting kit and instructions, we are also getting a decent Phillips screwdriver with a magnetic tip. Just a bit of a shame its handle is fairly short, otherwise I surely could have used it for my build projects and the like. As said before, we are pretty much looking at the same old Mugen 5 that we learned to love and appreciate, with the only difference here being it's all blacked out, which not only applies to the heatsink, but fan too. The latter being Scythe's well-known so-called Case Flex 120mm fan with pretty good build quality. Of course, it also comes with rubber pads, so we don't need to expect any vibration noise. Nice and fair, I find the fact that we do not only get 2 fan clips for that 1 fan that comes included, but that there's also a second pair of fan clips included for an optional second fan, just in case you decide to upgrade down the line. The aesthetics are fantastic in my opinion. I'd even go as far and go for the term breathtaking. Everything just looks so minimalistic and elegant, and the build quality is top-notch. As we come to expect with modern air coolers, this one comes with an offset as well as asymmetrical design too, meaning we don't need to fear any clearance issues with the memory, no matter how tall those modules actually are, and I can totally confirm that. Not really surprising is the fact we get a nickel-plated copper base here, along with a total of 6 heat pipes coming in at a diameter of 6mm each, respectively. All those recent sockets are being supported, of course, albeit STRX4 for AMD's Threadripper, as so often, didn't make it onto the official support list. That does make sense though, we see that with most CPU coolers out there. Threadripper, after all, sports a gigantic heat spreader. The installation went all hassle-free, no issues whatsoever, and a very simple procedure. I'd also like to praise the great build quality of the mounting kit, all out of metal. Now before we get to the noise levels, let's first take a look at what the Mugen 5 Black Edition is capable of. As always, I'm cooling the AMD Ryzen 7 3800X, a CPU that's known to run fairly toasty even at stock settings. Well, it's obvious, the Mugen 5 Black Edition does not catapult itself to the very top of the list. What needs to be considered though is the price, as well as the fact that today's Scythe cooler is completing its job with a single 120mm fan. You do in fact notice quite a difference in cooling performance when attaching 2 fans to such a heatsink, which clearly can be seen in the case of the Scythe Mugen 5 ARGB+. The biggest differences, needless to say, can be witnessed at really high temperatures. So whereas with a Mugen 5 equipped with 2 fans, you can keep up well with those 2 legends Noctua NHD 15 and Deepcool Assassin 3, today's Mugen with only a single fan definitely drops behind a few degrees Celsius. Nevertheless, a very good result if you ask me. However, I did come across slightly quieter models when it comes to air coolers, very recently in fact. The Enermax ETS F40 FS series is slightly more compact, slightly cheaper, does offer slightly less performance though, but subjectively speaking, is operating a bit quieter at full load as opposed to today's Mugen 5 Black Edition. This most likely is due to the fact the mentioned Enermax coolers come with 140mm fans respectively, and not 120mm ones as with Scythe. But please don't get me wrong, I still consider the Mugen 5 Black Edition fairly quiet. Under lighter loads, it's actually whisper quiet. And when keeping in mind what kind of monster you can transform such a Mugen 5 into by simply attaching another fan, that alone is worth a recommendation if you're asking me. However, you have to admit, there are so many great CPU coolers out there worth recommending. These days there aren't really bad ones out there as long as you go with reputable brands. At the end of the day, it's more like a matter of preference. The only thing that would have made this cooler even more attractive is if there had been a second fan included, in my opinion. With that being said, thanks so much for watching, take care of yourselves, and see you next time.